at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello everybody and welcome along. It's me, Tonia Buxton, filling in for the great Mark Steyn. 2022 has certainly had its downs: depravity, deprivation, control and coercion, and ever-growing hysteria. But a new year is a new hope. Today we will have a romp through the various lessons we've learned from the post-COVID order and how we can say goodbye to the fairy tale, or rather the nightmare, that was 2020. We'll look at everything from the fear instilled into us by our leaders, the tactics used to control us, and the restrictions placed upon us. But fear not, with each of my wonderful guests, we will leave you with top tips on how to take back control of your lives and what you can do to work on your well-being and make for a happier, healthier and freer 2023. Don't forget to let me know what you think on GBViews at gbnews.uk. Send me everything you've got. And in homage to Stump the Steyn in Mark's absence, we'll end with Bucking the Buxton. That's all coming up after the latest headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Tonia. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. 4 people have been injured in a suspected gas explosion at a house in Worcestershire. Emergency services were called to the incident in Evesham shortly after 5 p.m. 3 of the injured were taken to hospital. 5 neighbouring properties were evacuated as a precaution, and people are being asked to stay away from the area. West Midlands Police have named a 23-year-old man killed at a nightclub in Birmingham last night as Cody Fisher. Officers were called to the Crane nightclub just before midnight on Boxing Day after reports a man had been stabbed on the dance floor. Hundreds of people were at the club at the time. Witnesses are being urged to come forward. Well, meanwhile, Merseyside Police has vowed to be relentless in its murder investigation of a 26-year-old woman killed on Christmas Eve. Elle Edwards was shot at the Lighthouse pub in Wallasey Village while celebrating Christmas with friends and family. A 30-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. A 19-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder. Rail passengers are being told to expect significant disruption into the new year amid a wave of industrial unrest across the country. There were busy scenes at London's King's Cross station earlier due to the knock-on effects of Boxing Day strikes. Members of the TSSA at Cross Country have been staging a 24-hour walkout as part of their long-running dispute over pay and conditions. At least 60 people have now died and thousands are without power as winter storms continue to hammer the US and Canada. Freezing temperatures and blizzard conditions have left many areas under more than 4 feet of snow. The city of Buffalo in New York State has been hit the hardest, with 28 fatalities there, many people freezing to death in their cars. President Joe Biden has declared a federal emergency. Mark Sommer is a journalist with Buffalo News. He told us people were warned not to use the roads.
There was a travel ban instituted immediately on Friday morning, but it didn't stop a lot of people from getting in their cars. Maybe they wanted to rush to relatives' houses for Christmas. Maybe they wanted to get supplies at the last minute. Whatever the case may be, a lot of people were out of their homes when they shouldn't have been. And some froze to death. It also made it really difficult for search and rescue operations and for snowplows to clear the roads because they had these scattered, stranded cars all over the place.
And a yellow weather warning remains in place for snow and ice in the north and east of Scotland. The Met Office says freezing conditions could last until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Traffic Scotland says motorists should plan ahead with ongoing travel disruption likely due to patchy ice. That's mainly on higher ground. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Back now to Tonia Buxton.
It really is my honour to be asked to stand in for Mark Steyn while he's away this evening. I'm not even going to try and fill his shoes, just keep them warm. This time of year, between the old year and the new, is a time of reflection, of contemplation, a time to look back at what we have achieved and what we have been through. It's also a time of resolution. How do we want 2023 to be? It must also be a time of lessons learnt, personally, socially, hopefully globally, and lessons we never want repeated. What I have personally observed over the latter months of this year is the big brush under the carpet. Not only has there been a denial and a minimalisation of the harm, but we have been asked for an amnesty. An amnesty request, may I add, by the very individuals cheerleading the draconian conditions that were forced upon us. They want to be forgiven for closing schools, for preventing people seeing their loved ones, for pushing medications people did not want and making pariahs of others. My guests and I stood firm in the face of vilification, abuse and attempts to cancel us. We knew the damage lockdowns would do. We knew that the impact of the virus was being blown out of all proportion. While very nasty to the very elderly and those with certain clinical conditions, the average age at death was and still is 82. We knew shutting schools and isolating children would do incalculable harm. We knew it would and will take years to try and right the wrongs. Children were almost no risk from COVID, but have arguably suffered the greatest burden of the pandemic response, with school closures, sports and clubs stopped, being left unable to socialise with friends and family. The current Strep A outbreak has been linked to the effects of lockdown as we continue to find out more ways in which children were harmed. They say they were following the science, but it was a selective science, a science that was influenced by behavioural psychologists to control people and drive knee-jerk reactions to the propaganda in the mainstream media. Other scientists and doctors who oppose the lockdowns, who were worried about the consequences and who warned that the modelling was flawed, were silenced. We were and are on the right side of history, but most importantly, humanity. Of course we will forgive those who were blinded by the utter lies and mass hypnosis of those in charge, the mainstream media and our politicians. We forgive those that were brainwashed and nudged, but we need to hear their apology first, their acknowledgement that they were wrong. Otherwise, it will happen again. We tried to speak the truth, to flag up the inevitable consequences of locking down whole populations, especially our children. We warned of the damage to society, to businesses, to humanity, but we were silenced, banned, fined, demonised, and others. Perhaps most important to remember, out of everything, is that the powers that be have not stopped pushing the COVID narrative. Far from it. And it's not the only narrative they're pushing now. It's about war. It's about the climate, the fear-mongering, the pushing of vaccines, and the relentless grasping of control of every aspect of our lives goes on. How can there be an amnesty when the crimes are still being committed? These are the truths that must be faced up to, questions that must be answered. But in this hour, I want to address some of these thoughts with my brilliant guests. Each one has had a unique insight into what has been happening since March 2020. We will be discussing what happened, but most importantly, what you can do to fix the damage and to never let it happen again. I'm joined now by Professor Mark Steyn from the London South Bank University, who is a specialist in mental health and has authored a wide range of published research on psychological distress during the COVID-19 pandemic. Mark Steyn, thank you so much for joining me. So, after almost 3 years of the pandemic, how is our mental health?
Our mental health is not great. In the UK, we're probably, compared to pre-pandemic levels, we have twice the level of psychological distress.
Twice?
Twice, roughly
Double.
Twice, yes. It peaked in around about March, April, May 2021, where we were around about 2.5 times higher than pre-pandemic levels.
So that's just a ridiculous response, isn't it? The way our mental health has been abused is ridiculous.
Yes, we know what's happened. There was fear-mongering on the part of media and government, which increased anxiety responses surrounding the virus. We don't know about the long-term effects of that. It could fuel obsessive-compulsive disorder, health anxiety. Then we had the lockdowns that decimated social networks, parts of the economy, and also meant that people were at home, alone, and started to engage in all sorts of unhelpful behaviors, alcohol use, gambling, gaming, etc.
So what are your thoughts on the ONS data on the cost of living and depression in Britain today?
So the ONS published some data from a period of around about a month, from the end of September until the end of October, and the staggering finding is that roughly 16% of the UK population is experiencing some form of moderate to severe depression, with particular groups very negatively affected.
Well, I mean, we all see it in our families, don't we? We see it with our children, we see it with our parents, we see it, but what can we learn from this?
We should learn never to have lockdowns again, because the human cost is enormous.
Can you repeat that? Can you repeat it loudly?
Yes, never to have lockdowns again. I don't think there is much scientific basis to have them in the first place. We didn't really have them in the past with pandemics, which were probably far more serious than the one we went through. And the importance of reconnecting socially and ensuring that people are not scared into submission, that they're educated about what's going on.
So what can people do to help themselves?
So in this moment in time, we are at the tail end of a series of events that have increased psychological distress. The biggest one now is cost of living. So there are many things we can try and do now For me, the number one thing, the one that I help most people with, is to reestablish daily routines, to calm down, to get to a point where we're eating properly, sleeping properly, exercising. Then there is all the issue to do with personal debt, hard decisions that have to be made surrounding the money we do have available at present, looking at incomings and outgoings, being smarter with debt. It's also a period where we could look at upskilling ourselves, finding new ways of generating income. As I said earlier, reconnecting to people who are important to us in life. So a series of things. We cannot change the environment directly, but we can try and manage the best we can.
So you've also set up a website, I think, www.jaaq.org.
Yes.
What does that do?
So I haven't set it up, but I've been involved in helping set it up. It's Just Ask a Question. It's a social media mental health platform that allows people to gain access to professionals in the field, academics, researchers, and clinicians who answer 60, 70, 80, 100 standard questions you might have about mental health. It bypasses the search engines and goes directly to experts. And I think it's an invaluable resource in this moment in time.
I loved it because I went on it and had a little kind of play, as it were. And I like the fact that it's so personable, that it feels like that person's talking to you. So, I mean, I know you say that, these 60, 100, whatever questions they are standard questions, but they feel very personable. And I think in the light of the world that we're living in at the moment, especially with what's going on within the NHS, you can't actually get anybody to talk to if you're suffering from mental health issues.
Yes.
So this is almost like someone talking to you.
Yes, it's an opportunity to have access through this platform to leading experts who will be able to answer all sorts of questions. Is depression biologically based? Do alcohol problems ever resolve? How many people suffer for body dysmorphia, etc. And you know that the quality of the information provided is of a high standard because these are some of the top specialists in the world in mental health. And there are many people with lived experience sharing their experiences too.
I just feel that we need to, every person that I've got on today, I want to leave the studio with a note of happiness and a note of joy for the people watching on GB News, because that's what we need, that's what we deserve. So what would be the one point of happiness that you told people to look for in their lives?
Yeah, so we need to return to be together, to be part of the social networks that have been essential to our history as human beings. So I would say now, reconnect as much as possible in things that have been forgotten or were very important. Reactivate them, be with people, maybe stay away from technology. The value that we get in terms of the boost to our mood that comes through being with people is unparalleled.
Professor Marcantonio Sbarba, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think everything you've said is invaluable. Coming up, as our leaders continue on their crusade into our private lives, we will talk with the author of A State of Fear, Laura Dobsworth, about the role of the nudge in the post-COVID world. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
As Mark Steyn says, this is the People's Channel, so let's channel what the people are thinking. We asked you, will we have a Covistan-free year in 2023? Well, Jane says, my household will for sure. We're done with that nonsense. Well done, I agree with that. Good girl. Lama says, I've been to Covistan. Nice place with great architecture. The language is a bit of a barrier, mind you, as everyone wears a mask. Please, aren't we all just done with these masks? Honestly, I had a great time walking into places saying, I'm abstaining, or I'm not allowed to wear a mask. I've got a medical issue, and so have all 4 of my children and my husband and any guests that we've got with us. It used to drive the security guards mad. But anyway. And Leslie says, if we decide it's all over, then it's all over. I don't think we will ever be manipulated to that extent again. Well, I sincerely hope not. Our next guest is the legendary Laura Dodsworth. Her exceptional book, A State of Fear, perfectly chronicled our descent into hysteria and illiberal rule by the decree of tunnel vision nerds during the self-inflicted chaos of 2020. Laura has since continued the offensive. At a Cambridge Union debate in October, she attacked the Nudge Unit, a government department set up under David Cameron to covertly alter the behaviour of the population to comply with the demands of the so-called experts. And what a speech it was. Democracy should be enacting the will of the people. Nudges are about changing the will of the people, Laura explained, summing up the danger to our liberty that such organisations represent. But what about these experts themselves? They are, by definition, specialists, not generalists. They have a role, nobody doubts that. But such types are perhaps the last people on earth to be making value judgments and decisions that require careful consideration of the whole of the human experience. Take a look at this passage by Robert Hyman about how complete men and women should go about their lives. A human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, con a ship, design a building, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve equations, analyse a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. Specialisation is for insects. Insects indeed. We don't want to be insects. We don't want to be in the pod feasting on them either. Well, time for our New Year's resolution on this one. How do we wrestle control away from the anoraks and start becoming the kind of complete free men and women exercising their agency and their liberty that the great Mr. Heinlein so eloquently described? Well, I'm joined now by the author of A State of Fear, Laura Dodsworth, to answer that very question. So, Laura, what can we do now that the government have employed these type of units? And what was the worst that they did to us during this time?
Oh, first of all, your opener was great. I think you should write the next blurb for my new book. That was so good. Especially the bit about not being insects, not eating them, because that's something we can talk about, eating insects. What are the worst things they did? Well, that is a great question, and it's only difficult because they did so much. I mean, if you think back to the beginning of COVID, early in March, Patrick Vallance said that COVID would be a very mild illness for the vast majority of us. Within about 10 days, Boris Johnson said that we had to be aware of the devastating impact of this silent killer. The government performed quite a U-turn, and when it did, in its management of the pandemic, it decided to exaggerate the risks. We can't forget slogans like, anyone can get it, anyone can spread it, don't go out, you might spread it. Granny killer, I mean, that was a terrible thing to say to children, don't kill Granny. Don't let a cup of coffee cost lives.
Can I just add on that note, because this is the one that really bugs me, the granny killer, because, you know, my granny was killed because of lockdown.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it was a granny killer. Lockdowns killed our granny.
Well, also, people's grannies did die of COVID, but to put the responsibility onto their grandchildren is just grossly unfair because, as we knew at the beginning, and we know even more now, it was very stratified by age and clinical morbidity. Grannies were more at risk than grandchildren, but a lot of pressure was put onto the young. I think just in 2020, the government spent £160 million just on advertising, making it the country's biggest advertiser. There was an onslaught of fear-mongering, nudge and propaganda. So it's no surprise that by July 2020, 6 to 7% of the population, most of the population thought that 6 to 7% of the population had died of COVID, which would have been 4.5 million bodies. So within a few months, people had grossly overestimated the deaths by over 100. And that's something that the government did to us. They really micromanaged our lives. I think you're in a lot of trouble when your government is telling you which spoons to take to someone's house for Christmas dinner, whether you can have Christmas dinner and whether you can hug your relatives. So they did, while trying to manage the pandemic, they leveraged fear too heavily. They nudged us, they used propaganda. It was an onslaught of doom-mongering and behavioural science. So they did a lot wrong. And I think the power got to their heads, and we're seeing it continue. We see it now with climate, which you mentioned. There's this concerted campaign to make us eat insects. You know, no one's clamouring to eat insects. No one's going, oh, me, I want to eat insects, make them available. No, not at all. Yet we've got trials in Welsh schools. We've got celebrities pimping insect powders. We had insects on the Great British Bake Off. Yeah. That's just one of many approaches there are right now to nudge us into climate change behaviour.
So having insects on the Bake Off is a nudge?
Yeah, I'd say so. And these things don't all happen by accident. Last year, the government's nudge unit, at the time it was 1/3 owned by the Cabinet Office, produced a report in collaboration with Sky, licensed broadcaster, on how to nudge the viewer using TV programming, including things like weather reports, news, documentaries, soap operas, general entertainment, children's programming, product placement, in order to nudge us towards net zero behaviour.
But, you know, some people will say that it's the government's job to lead us into living healthier lives, to caring more about the environment. Don't you think that's the case? Don't you think that's what the government should be doing?
I think that's a tricky question. I think there's different levels of comfort with nudge. Yes, it's the government's role to enact policies. So this is what the government should do. It should have some policies and say, vote us in on this basis and then we'll make them happen. But that's not what happens with nudge. They get voted in for certain policies. And then once they're in, they try to nudge us. That's below the level of consciousness in order to follow more unpopular policies, such as net zero, which involves one hair shirt after another. That involves changing our travel, what we eat, meat versus insects, whether we drive, putting planters across road in London. They can't do this unless they nudge us. That's working below the level of consciousness. And it's sneaky. It's sneaky. It's not fair play. And it's not in manifestos.
And also, you know, especially when it comes to climate change, the science is still out about that. So they're nudging us for something that they're not 100% sure of. So what we need to know, and what I need to know, and what your book, State of Fear, did for me, it just opened my eyes. I had no idea about nudge, and suddenly I started seeing the nudge. So, I mean, people should go get your book, but if they don't go get your book, can you give us some tips on how to avoid the nudge, how to avoid being brainwashed?
Yes, I can. I loved your last comment there from a viewer saying that she won't ever be manipulated again. And exactly what you say, once you see nudges, you can't unsee them. Now, everybody wants to know their own mind. Everybody wants to be sovereign over their own mind. You can't know your own mind. You can't be in control of your own mind if somebody else is in control of your mind. So you need to be aware of the techniques. You need to understand the behavioural science that's conveyed upon you, the external forces that try to influence you, manipulate you, brainwash you. And you can also develop your own psychological resistance. So here's 3 tips. We talked about the Great British Break-Off and insets. TV is entertainment. It's fun. It's great to turn it on and tune out. Brilliant. But you do need to understand that TV is used for social engineering purposes, public health, social purpose, and it's been used historically like that. It's used, but like now, COP26, all the soap operas converged on environmental storylines. That's not an accident. So perhaps watch less TV, apart from this station, obviously, and watch it mindfully. Understand it's used for social engineering. Social proof is a classic nudge. Now, this plays upon the idea that we're social animals, we're herd animals, and that serves a good evolutionary purpose. You know, we don't eat the poisonous berries on the bush because no one else does. So it's useful, but it's used against us. Sometimes it's quite helpful. Amazon will say, because you bought book A, you'll like book B. Now, that's great. You may well like book B, but they're selling to you. 8 out of 10 cats prefer whiskers. And it's also used in reverse. It's used to silence the dissenters and the outliers. Think about how we were all encouraged into social conformity during COVID. So I would say to people, be aware of the social proof, but don't feel you must follow it. And more than that, be the person that speaks out, be the whistleblower, be the outlier. Because it can be difficult the first time, but you get used to it.
And also it makes you feel good about yourself.
It does make you feel good about yourself.
For yourself.
Yeah, there's a lot of pride in being the person that speaks up. Think about the fable, the fairy tale of the emperor, the naked emperor, the emperor who wore no clothes. Now, he went along with it. The courtiers went along with it. All the townspeople went along with it. It's one boy who spoke out, and he changed everything. So when somebody speaks out, sometimes it's the right thing to do, to step away from the group. Another really simple thing people can do is to remember HALT. Now, Alcoholics Anonymous talk about this. So if you are hungry, angry, lonely or tired, you're more likely to fall off the wagon.
Angry, lonely or tired.
Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So you've got to look after your physical needs, but also your emotional needs, or you're more likely to fall back into your addictions. But that also affects things like purchasing decisions and your susceptibility to manipulation. So it's simple things like don't go to the supermarket when hungry, but don't go on social media before breakfast. And if you are hungry or angry or tired or something makes you emotional, don't just immediately share it. Think about it. So what's your physical and your emotional needs before you take on board new information, or before you rush into making purchasing decisions, for instance.
Laura, that's the best advice you can give, isn't it? I mean, just halt before you start doing things. And that one bit of advice about not going onto social media before breakfast or not going onto it first thing in the morning can actually change your life, can't it?
It really does. I think it really sets an emotional tone for the day. I'm pretty addicted. That's my top tip. Don't go on before breakfast, or it's all downhill from there onwards.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Right, next up we have the journalistic legend that is Toby Young, General Secretary of the Free Speech Union too, might I add. He'll be discussing what the outlook for freedom of expression is as we head into the new year. After that, you, the viewer, have the chance to ask me whatever you like with Buck the Buxton. You know, who came up with that? It's brilliant. So get in touch via email or Twitter. Don't touch that dial, as Mark Steyn would say.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In many ways, the pandemic was a revelation. It has revealed how our governments and institutions will work hand in hand to advance a certain agenda, whilst taking advantage of a crisis. Like zombies, we were told to follow the science. But what is the science exactly? Well, let's look at the social media companies, shall we? From YouTube. YouTube doesn't allow content that contradicts local health authorities or the World Health Organization's medical information about COVID-19. And where do they get their medical information from, I wonder? And who funds them? Anyway, that's another question. So we now have, we remove misinformation during public health emergencies when public health authorities conclude that the information is false. And up until recently from Twitter, we consider claims to be false or misleading if they have been confirmed to be false by subject matter experts, such as public health authorities. So, in other words, the truth is dictated by government. Misinformation is defined as anything which contradicts the official guidance. This is journalism in reverse, and there are serious consequences to this. It has just been revealed by Elon Musk's release of the Twitter files that Twitter executives at the command of the US government sought to silence those exposing information that was true but inconvenient. Well, who better to talk to than the General Secretary of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young. Hello, Toby. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Tonia.
So, what were the main threats to free speech in 2023?
Well, I think the big threats to free speech in 2023 are likely to be legislative threats. So there's the online safety bill, which will likely become law next year. And I think that even as it stands, it's slightly improved. It was terrible. It's now not great, but not terrible. But I hope that it can be improved more before it becomes law, because if it can't, then that will pose a big threat to free speech online. I think that the new Public Order Act or new Public Order Bill, which is going to limit the right to protest in various ways, could pose a threat to free speech. There is an amendment to that bill which proposed by Stella Creasy, whereby it'll become illegal to protest within a buffer zone outside an abortion clinic. And as we saw last week, where in Birmingham Council had imposed a similar buffer zone outside an abortion clinic in Birmingham, and a woman was arrested for engaging in silent prayer, a Christian woman, within that buffer zone. And if this amendment to the Public Order Bill means that people won't be able to think bad thoughts in the buffer zones outside abortion clinics, and that becomes a national law, I think that will pose a very significant threat to free speech. And I think there are the ramifications of anti-misogyny laws. There's a current proposal before the Scottish Parliament for an anti-misogyny law. Stella Creasy has also been petitioning the Parliament in Westminster to pass an anti-misogyny law. The worry then is that even though it's very well intentioned, it's designed to protect women and girls from misogynistic language and violent behaviour, but much of that is already against the law. And I worry that if there is an anti-misogyny law passed, it'll mean that if you say you don't think trans women are women, for instance, you could be prosecuted for misogyny because the law will protect trans women as much as it'll protect women. So I think those are some of the bigger fears. It's all about legislation and making sure that our free speech, our freedoms aren't curtailed even further in 2023.
And how do we prevent this legislation that is kind of illiberal going through? What can we do?
Well, the Free Speech Union is lobbying the government to try and make sure that when these laws do go through, they pose less of a threat to free speech. So obviously, I would encourage all your viewers to join the Free Speech Union. It's as cheap as chips. But I think, people can write to their MPs. People can engage in peaceful protest. I think, one of the main reasons that free speech is in jeopardy in this country at the moment, Tonia, is people lack courage. They think that if they speak their minds on these issues, if they speak up, if they say something that's likely to be unfashionable or unpopular, or their colleagues at work are likely to complain about it, or they're going to get abuse on social media, that will ruin their lives, that will mark them. They'll be ostracized, pushed out of respectable society. But often, if you can just encourage people to be a bit bolder, if you can somehow lower the cost of speaking your mind in a perfectly lawful way, expressing a point of view which until very recently, until yesterday, was perfectly legitimate, if you can encourage people to be a little bit bolder, a little bit braver, then that's really going to be the bulwark which defends free speech. It's fear of the repercussions of saying what you really think, which I think is the greatest threat to free speech. So I'd encourage people to just speak out, speak their minds, say what they really think about these issues.
And also that feels wonderful as well. When you're speaking the truth and you're speaking your mind, and we were talking about mental health earlier, that will improve your mental health. Sitting cowering in the corner because you're frightened of being cancelled or people looking at you differently, even though you know it's the truth, is very bad for you. And that's one of the things that you do best of all, Toby. You speak up, you don't care that you know you're going to be vilified for speaking the truth, but you're a very brave man. I want to ask you also a little bit about Twitter, because we learnt yesterday that Twitter and other social media companies suppress the voices that question the efficacy and safety of the COVID-19 vaccines, even when they belong to eminent doctors and scientists. Why do you think they did that?
Yeah, I think the latest revelations in the Twitter files that have dropped in the last couple of days, have confirmed the worst fears of people like me about the extent of the suppression of dissent, both about the wisdom of the lockdown policy and about the safety and efficacy of the mRNA vaccines on social media, not just Twitter, but on social media more broadly. We were accused when we claimed that various public authorities, police enforcement agencies, politicians were applying pressure to social media companies like Twitter, like Facebook, companies like Google. We were accused of being conspiracy theorists. But as Elon Musk said recently, now that we know what really happened at Twitter, it's almost as if every conspiracy theory about the suppression of dissent on the big social media platforms has turned out to be true. And that is very alarming. But it's great that we now know, that we've now got the facts, that we can now, anyone who accuses us of engaging in conspiracy theorizing when we claim that dissent is being suppressed by the state, essentially, on social media platforms, we can point to these files and say, no, look, it really happened. Here's the evidence. It's absolutely clear. And I hope that that will shame the other social media platforms to be a little bit bolder, a little bit less willing in future to do the bidding of the FBI and of the Biden administration, of the CDC, of people like Anthony Fauci. We need to debate in public these very important issues that affect all of our lives. And the argument always is, as you said when you introduced me, Tonia, the argument always is that we're suppressing this information because it's misinformation. It's misinformation that's going to cause harm. In fact, it's often perfectly legitimate public debate about big, important issues that affect all of our lives. And we deserve to have that debate. We need to have that debate. If you want to minimize the harmful effects of policies, you need to debate what those effects are likely to be before they're imposed. What happened over the last 2.5, 3 years is that a lot of these really big policies that affect all of our lives, such as the lockdown, such as the vaccine rollout, such as the vaccine mandates, were imposed without a proper public debate. And I think if we can show in the course of the next year that imposing those policies without properly evaluating them, debating them in the public square, caused more harm than good in many cases, then we can give the lie to this argument that suppressing debate is necessary in order to avoid harm. I think it'll be possible to show, but we need to show it, that suppression of debate, suppression of good faith discussion by people like Martin Kulldorff and Jay Bhattacharya, eminent medical scientists, that suppression actually caused harm. It didn't prevent harm. And if we can show that, if we can demonstrate that beyond doubt, it's going to be harder for social media companies to be bullied and browbeaten in future to suppressing good faith public debate by perfectly eminent, respectable people like Martin Kulldorff and Jay Bhattacharya.
Toby Young, thank you so much. And all I can say is that if you can go join the Free Speech Union, I'm a member and I think it's brilliant and it's really important that we keep our free speech. Thanks, Toby. Coming up, what we can do in 2023 to make sure we are happier. Mental health practitioner and businesswoman Zoe Clues is here. And stay tuned as Buck the Buxton is around the corner and you won't want to miss any of that. See you in a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Now it's time for the best happy ending. In this show, we've broken down all that has happened since that dreadful year of 2020, the long-term effects it's had on people and the break of trust that it caused in our society. It divided people, families and communities. It was a terrible time for mental health. But 2022 is almost over, and it's time to look towards 2023 and all the possibilities it holds. Mental health practitioner and businesswoman Zoe Clues is here with some tips and tricks to take back control of your life in 2023. Hello, Zoe. How are you?
Hi, Tonia. I'm great.
So, why have we got so unhappy?
Well, it's so multi-factor, isn't it? Where do we start? OK, so we've had 3 years of being told what to do, how to feel, what to do with our bodies. The government spent 500 million on COVID advertising, which is essentially fear messaging. We're not just going to flip out of that. You know, we're not appliances, we're human beings. It takes a while for our nervous system to recover. And of course, we haven't been able to recover because it's been shock after shock, or thing after thing, and it's been like cattle prods to the nervous system.
That's how it feels, you know, cattle prods to the nervous system.
Exactly
that is
what it is.
A great way of putting it.
And, you know, there is also allostatic load, which is when it's not just our stress, but it's also the stress of the collective as well. It's kind of like second-hand anxiety, really, that we've got. We're also living this digital world, which is unrolling at a breakneck speed. We're not actually designed as humans to be in touch with this many people, let alone all of their opinions. Mental health services are really stretched, people are under-supported, and everybody's stretched so they can't support their friends and family in the way that they'd like to. So it's no wonder that we're not exactly feeling sparkly.
OK, so that was the downside, but what can we do now to make ourselves feel more happy? What we've got, what control do we have?
OK, so I always say, don't search for happiness, search for relief, right? So we can easily find relief in a bottle of wine, won't feel necessarily relieved the next morning, right? So it's about finding relief in ways that are healthy. So the first thing, you know, with mental health, one of the most important things is boundaries. So I think with boundaries, you have to have 3 levels of boundaries. A boundary with yourself and the world, so that is kind of how much social media and how much news you consume, because of course fear is addictive and we're getting those cattle prods to the nervous system again. The second boundary is with other people in your life. So, you know, if you've got energy vampires, if you don't want to be an unpaid therapist, people draining you, that one, then it's boundaries with yourself. I always say good habits are difficult to form but easy to live with. Bad habits are easy to form, difficult to live with. So it's about boundaries with yourself. So getting enough rest, what are you eating, what are you drinking, you know, how you're treating yourself, basically. Because if you're in good physical health, that's going to support your emotional and mental health as well. The next thing is about, I think we can have all these different worries and it all gets contained in one big glut. And one of the most important things we can do is separate it out. So we've got our locus of control, that's what we're in charge of. We've got the areas we can influence, such as what we might choose to campaign on, and then we've got things that we can do nothing about, and then we have to just let that go.
So, what you're saying is that we do have control. We do have some control, so there are things that are out of our control, and
Absolutely.
if we focus on those, then we can't get happy.
No. Exactly. So it's almost like a filing system, really, of recognising what you're in charge of, what you can influence, and what you just have to let go of. You know, because worrying about the things that we can't control is one of the fastest ways to make ourselves unhappy.
Exactly. So, come on, what are your quick-fire top tips then?
Quick-fire top tips. So, you know, it's about doing things that make you happy, OK? So having really good boundaries, protecting yourself from all the negative stuff and the fear, spending time with people you love, making sure you know, what makes you joyful, you know, spending some time connecting in with those things, really looking after yourself, protecting yourself from all the difficulties and things that are going on, and realising as well that I think, you know, when we're going through a hard time, the most important thing to remember is that it will pass. It might pass like a kidney stone,
that's
but
the
it will
biggest thing.
pass.
It might pass like a kidney stone. That's a great way of putting it, but it will pass. And I think that's what people need to hear, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's just been this relentless onslaught, isn't it? And it's just so important to keep protecting ourselves from what's going on. So having these boundaries for yourself around what's going on is, you know, one of the most important things. And connecting in with what makes you feel joyful. And purpose is really important as well.
So the main points that I'm hearing here are connecting with what makes you feel happy, which, you know what I'm like. I'm just a joy seeker. I love feeling happy and joyous and surrounding myself with people that are going to do that. And what was the next one you said that was?
You know, a sense of purpose. You know, I think, you know, and here's the thing as well, when, you know, what's happened with, you know, with the lockdowns, we all got sort of shunted. We've got these kind of 4 horsemen of the physiological defence mechanisms. We've all heard of fight and flight, but we also have these other defences called freeze and fawn. So a lot of people have got stuck in fight, so they're getting constantly angry, arguing on Twitter, etc. We get stuck in the flight response, so we're getting anxious, we can't sleep, we get obsessive compulsive. And then we've got freeze, which is when people tend to get depressed, and then we've got fawn, which is when people go into a lot of people pleasing. So we saw a lot of that going on with COVID, of acquiescing and just getting very, very scared about everything. And what we always want to be doing is working to get ourselves into something, a psychological space called the window of tolerance. Now, that's where we feel cool, calm, collected. It's when we feel sane, it's when we feel well, it's when we can cope with things, basically. So it's about, if you've got really anxious or really angry, you've got to down-regulate your nervous system. So it's things like walking in nature, slowing down, taking breaks. And if you've got really low, then it's about upregulating your nervous system. So things like music, you know, exercise, endorphins, laughing, you know, it's really important for us to be spending time with people we love as well and having a lot of connection, because that's a way of us regulating our nervous systems.
Zoe, thank you so much. I think we've got some
pleasure.
amazing tips there. Well, now it's time to buck the Buxton. OK, this is going to be interesting. Well, Narinda has said, what has she said? Have a great show, Tonia. Thank you very much. I like that. I've had a great show. It's a shame GB News wasn't around in 2020 as there was no broadcaster challenging the madness of lockdown. Tell me about it, because that's exactly how I felt. I felt like I was going completely insane. But this channel, this is the true channel of freedom of speech, of open debate, and I'm very proud to be here. And it has been a complete honour to stand in for Mark this evening. Up next, it's Tonight Live with Simon Evans. Simon, what have you got for us?
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, goodness, we've got quite a menu lined up. We will also be looking at the same concerns you have discussed earlier, the mental health and relationship issues and so on, with one of the nation's leading agony aunts. We'll be looking at some people who've made a difference for other people's lives over Christmas. A couple of contacts of mine down in the Hove area who have made a very welcome foray into food banks and free canteens and hot meals for the less well-off in society and so on. And we will also be taking a look at the papers and the stories of the day and so on. I have a couple of hot talking points to dispute with what I hope are a provocative panel. And generally speaking, just trying to fill Dan Wootton's substantial shoes for a couple of hours before moving on to headliners.
Well, that's fantastic. And that's all coming up after the weather. And as they say, have fun and stay free.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK will see a cold and frosty start for many, but turning wetter in the west. Here are the details. A cold and icy morning across northern Scotland with sleet and snow showers, turning cloudy as rain and hill snow arrives from the south, turning windy too. A wet morning across Northern Ireland with brisk winds developing. The rain could be heavy at times, leading to some tricky travelling conditions. Cloud amounts increasing through Tuesday morning across northern England, the wind picking up too, icy stretches around first thing as the cold air lingers. A cloudy and damp morning for Wales and the Liverpool Bay Area as rain moves in from the west. The rain turning heavy as the morning progresses, temperatures rising after a cold start. A patchy frost across the Midlands Tuesday morning, but temperatures quickly rising as clouds spread in from the west. The risk of rain arriving as the morning progresses, with the winds increasing too. A cold and frosty start for many across East Anglia tomorrow morning, with some morning sunshine. Cloud amounts increasing from the west as the morning moves on, with rain arriving later. A chilly start to the day across southern England, with the best of any morning sunshine in the east. Clouds increasing as the morning progresses, turning windy too, with rain later. Wet and windy weather will continue eastwards through the day, with snow falling over Scotland. Temperatures on the mild side for many.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper